More decentralized system where mini shelters with 15 to 40 beds open up in low-rise suburban areas. He says it would be easier to house people if they don't have to come downtown for a bed.
How much easier to divert somebody who's come to a center that's within their community they know, so they're not displaced.
But that isn't easy in a city where vast stretches aren't zoned for shelters. In low-density residential areas and on some busy commercial stretches, emergency shelters are not a permitted use. Some cities are loosening those rules, and Ottawa could soon join them, as city staff propose a new bylaw that allows shelters in every urban zone. Councillor Stephanie Plante represents the downtown ward with those 3 big shelters.
I find if this becomes everyone's problem, then everybody will be engaged with solutions.
Even some suburban councillors are getting on board, like Glenn Gower.
No one should be excluded from living in a neighborhood. I think from a moral or ethical perspective, that's the right thing to do.
He says those shelters wouldn't look like they do downtown. The proposed bylaw still has height and setback limits. It must now go through a year and a half of public consultation, redrafting, and council votes before it can take effect. Arthur White-Crummey, CBC News, Ottawa.
And Elise Skura has an in-depth look at this story on the Ottawa page at cbcnews.ca. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. Here's what's coming up on the show. We'll discuss what's happening with Israel's military operation in Rafah and other recent developments in the conflict between Israel and Hamas. That chat with international affairs expert Colin Robertson. We'll also speak with National Post parliamentary reporter Ryan Tumulty. He'll join us to talk about what he's watching in Ottawa this week, including new legislation aimed at dealing with foreign interference in Canadian politics. Jeremy Skibicki has admitted to killing 4 women, but his lawyers say his client's not criminally responsible. What does that mean? A law professor will explain. But first, it's spring cleaning day in Winnipeg's downtown. We'll hear what Downtown Biz has planned to get our streets spick and span. All coming up on Information Radio. 11 minutes after 6 o'clock, time for news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, a legal expert says Jeremy Skibicki's lawyers could face an uphill battle in proving their client is not criminally responsible in the deaths of 4 women. Skibicki's lawyers now say he admits to killing all 4, but they will argue he's not criminally responsible due to a mental disorder. Brandon Trask at the University of Manitoba says NCR cases typically involve offences done over a short period of time, but Winnipeg police have said they believe Skibicki killed the women over a span of 2 months in 2022. Manitoba PCs accuse the NDP government of briefly reneging on a promise to hire all graduating paramedics. PC health critic Kathleen Cook says some paramedicine graduates were told they had no jobs waiting for them. The health minister says the timing of exams and the hiring of paramedics will be coordinated in the future. We'll hear more coming up in our next news at 6:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC News Desk. Abby Adiemi joins us now with a look at the weather. Good morning, Abby.
Good morning, Em. How's your commute in this morning?
Oh, very quiet. Got right through all the lights.
And it's like, we've gone past the chilly and the brisk morning, and it's now, more like mild, and you can have a good ride, you can have a good walk,
yes,
and you can have a good run.
In a T-shirt.
In a T-shirt. However, let's see, currently Winnipeg, we are at 14 degrees, cloudy skies overhead. Throughout the day, we can anticipate like a blend of sunshine and clouds, and then these clouds are going to be thickening up as we approach the noon period, bringing along some showers. So if you're stepping out later, you should be prepared for that. The wind is also something you need to take into consideration because the direction is going to be shifting from the south east to the east this morning, bringing some gusts along with it. Our daytime high will peak at 17 degrees, and as we move into the evening, those showers will gradually taper off, leaving us with, cloudy conditions, and then the winds will be easing off also as it comes in from the east into the overnight period. Across the province, though, We're going to be seeing sunnier skies in the north today. The conditions will be mainly sunny in the north. Very different story for what we have in the south here, where we have rain by the lunch hour. And we'll see that starting here in Winnipeg, the Winnipeg region, into eastern Manitoba, and we'll see that rain pushing a little bit farther north as we get through the afternoon. So areas like Gimli, Lac du Bonnet, Victoria Beach will be getting that rain through the mid-late afternoon period. And in summary, today's forecast, a mix of sun and clouds, a chance of showers by noon, and then the showers will be fading off by the evening period. And tomorrow promises to have like clearer skies. So I'm looking forward to tomorrow.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Abby Adeyemi. And joining us now with a look at traffic is Corey Funk.
Ran into work this morning and I did that thing where I assumed that, it was going to be actually cold outside.
Oh.
You think like, it's May. It's
Right.
probably cold in the morning. Not so much. Layered up. Show up to work real sweaty. But here we are. So far the commute though, otherwise, pretty straightforward. Haven't heard any major issues out there. But if you're walking, you're driving, you're biking, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. Let me know what you're seeing out there. I know yesterday there was a report about the river trail being partly flooded, particularly west of the Donald Street Bridge.
Yeah.
Pretty muddy, unbikeable is what the one report was. So tell me what you're seeing out there, especially if you are out there on the trails. Give me a call, 204-788-3093.
It's 6:15 and 15 degrees right now at the Forks. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. It's spring cleaning day for Winnipeg's downtown. The Downtown Winnipeg Biz is hosting its annual Spring Cleanup Day. Hundreds of people will gather this morning at Manitoba Hydro Place to kick off the event. Olivia Bilson is Director of Marketing, Communications and Engagement with the Downtown Winnipeg Biz. Good morning, Olivia.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us so early, too. So tell us about the spring cleanup. What does that involve?
You know what? We are actually on track for a record-setting event. We have close to 700 folks who have registered to come on out and support our efforts to spruce up our downtown. Like you said, everyone will be meeting this morning at 10 o'clock at Hydro Place. We have assigned folks, whether you're registered as a team or as a large group, into zones. So everybody will be sort of divvying up, heading out into their designated zone throughout the downtown area. We are providing all of the cleaning materials that are necessary: garbage bags, gloves, litter pickup, tools. We're providing everything to support a great day, and it really is. It's a fun day for everybody. We see, as I said, hundreds of people coming together to support our efforts to spruce up our downtown.
And you mentioned that people had already signed up and been assigned to teams, but what about people who are just hearing it now? Can they still come down and help out?
You know what? We would love all the helping hands. We will certainly welcome them to come and help and clean up our downtown. Absolutely. 10 o'clock, Hydro Place today. It'll be a great morning.
And so, you said there's more people this year, but generally, how much garbage do you pick up during these events?
There will be hundreds and hundreds of bags picked up. We will do a tabulation and see how much we collect. And, this does support the efforts of our Enviro team. We do keep track every year of what they do pick up. In 2023, the Biz team picked up over 900,000 of liters that year, removed more than 12,000 graffiti tags, and cleaned bus shelters over 5,000 times. So this day, our annual spring cleanup event really does support the efforts of our Enviro team, who are out on our streets 7 days a week, year-round, cleaning up our downtown day in, day out. So again, this yearly event really gives us that big pickup, that big enthusiasm as we head into the summer months.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be a boost for the regular crews. Are there certain items that are kind of problem items that you see year after year that have to be picked up?
There's certainly, a varying degree of, what's on the streets. We want to make sure that everybody has a really positive and safe experience. So we are telling folks that if they do come across something on the street that they're not sure and they don't want to pick up, do not pick it up. Just give our folks on the Enviro team a call. We will come and pick it up safely and remove it promptly. But like I said, we are providing all of the materials to make sure that this is a safe and fun event, and we certainly expect that it will be so.
Mm-hmm. I know in the past there's been a lot of cigarette butts and things like that. What kind of feedback does the biz hear after these cleanups happen?
This is it's a great event for all of our biz members, and even for those who, don't necessarily live, work, or visit the downtown that often. Like we said, this gives us a really big boost as we head into the spring, as we head into the summer months. It's a certainly welcome event by all of our biz members within the zone, and certainly that's why we're seeing such, large numbers in participation this year.
And for people who are coming down to help out, what are some things they might need to know? Like maybe there's a certain way they should dress or things they should bring. Like, how can they come prepared?
You know what? We're certainly asking folks to come prepared for the weather. We're hoping that those showers will absolutely hold off until this afternoon. It might be a little bit windy today, but certainly come dressed prepared for the weather. I think folks will certainly clock some good steps in today, picking up the litter. But like I said, we are preparing, all of those kits for everybody, giving those gloves, those garbage bags, those litter pickers. So certainly just come dressed for the weather and come dressed to have some fun with your team members and your colleagues.
And how big of an area? Like, you don't have to have the exact, square footage or whatever, but like, are we talking about the whole downtown or?
We are absolutely talking about the whole downtown, yeah. So the downtown improvement zone, we have sort of broken up into 6 zones that encompass our full footprint. So yeah, absolutely. We are hoping to, like I said, put on some lots of steps today as we send folks to those designated zones. Some of the zones are a little bit, a bit more of a walking distance from Hydro Place. So we are providing some transportation with Winnipeg Transit to get some of those groups out to the further zones. But like I said, we are doing our best to cover the whole area today. And I think with having, like I said, almost 700 folks registered to participate, we're certainly feeling very encouraged and inspired by everyone coming out today.
That's great. Wow. Well, I can't wait to see the results. Thanks so much, Olivia.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Olivia Bilson is Director of Marketing, Communications, and Engagement with the Downtown Winnipeg Biz. The event starts at 10 a.m. at Manitoba Hydro Place.
If I had my way, I'd rather part ways. Lost in days, losing energy. Nothing but haze right in front of me. Magic tricks, smoke and mirrors. Disappear when she's near. You're lost in a race, love you can't compete. It's ruthless, I'm sorry. Living in the clouds and wait for rain. I'm just like the seasons, feeling strange. I'm still wanting your way. When I am with her, I feel no pain. With liquor on my tongue, I just might say, can I have it my way, my way? the trick, I'm not here. Left my body mouse when I'm restless. Can't catch my breath till I'm next to a breast. And I'm not thinking of you. I'm not thinking of you. Not thinking of you.
Nice early morning vibes to wake up to. That was Charlotte Day Wilson with My Way. It's 6:23 and you're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. The world is watching many fast-moving developments in the war between Israel and Hamas in the Middle East. There were reports yesterday of a possible ceasefire deal developing. All the while, Israel seems to be moving forward with its military operation in Rafah in the Gaza Strip. For more, we're joined by Colin Robertson. He's a former Canadian diplomat and a fellow at the Canadian Global Affairs Institute. Good morning, Colin.
Good to be with you, Emily.
So what's the latest on Israel's military operation in Rafah?
Well, as you reported, Israel's objective was to seize the Rafah border crossing on the Gaza side, and they appear to have achieved that objective and are now poised to be able to continue their efforts to go into Rafah itself and eliminate the Hamas militants that are entrenched within, embedded within buildings and the civilian population. And that, of course, is likely to result in more collateral damage of civilians. So that's a kind of bleak side to this. As you reported, the War Cabinet met yesterday and turned down the potential ceasefire that the Palestinian authorities had announced earlier in the day, and that led to scenes of sort of jubilation on the Palestinian side, because, of course, this war has gone on now since October, and claimed over 35,000, almost 35,000 lives in the Palestinian Gaza territory.
And U.S. President Joe Biden also phoned the Israeli Prime Minister, right?
Yes, and I think he's made it pretty clear what he would like to see happen. But keep in mind that Prime Minister Netanyahu has, from the very beginning, declared that his objective is the elimination of Hamas. And he's not wavered from that. He's also facing, of course, domestic protests within Israel with people who want the hostages free and also want to have elections held. And when you look at the polling in Israel, I'm sure he looks at that as well. If he were to have an election, it would be unlikely that he would remain as prime minister. And if that were the case, then he would immediately find himself probably back in the courthouse, because there are corruption charges pending against him going back some time, and which could lead to him going to jail. So I think there are all sorts of interests at play here, and I think he has a personal interest in remaining as prime minister, and I think he also is firmly committed to the elimination of Hamas, because I think he was, of course, prime minister on October 7th when Hamas invaded, and there's a certain responsibility that he has as prime minister.
Yeah. And so, meanwhile, that offensive has started in and around Rafah. What's the situation on the ground there with Palestinians, especially the humanitarian situation?
Well, keep in mind this enclave of what was a couple of million has been under brutal assault from the air, and, of course, the pictures we see each night of the Israeli defense forces have gone in to eliminate Hamas. There's been a tremendous amount of collateral damage we talked about, but also the strip itself, the housing has been destroyed. There lack of water, lack of food, people living in tents or in their cars. It's pretty desperate, and also displaced time and again. And so Rafah, which had been a town of a couple 100,000, is over 1 million, and the Israelis have asked the people in Rafah to move south yet again. And so you saw those pictures of the convoys of trucks and people with all their bedding and things in the back of pickup trucks once again on the move. And so it's pretty desperate.
And then meanwhile, we've been hearing these reports of ceasefire negotiations. What do we know about that?
Well, I according to Hamas, we've only seen their side, what was envisaged, and this may give us some idea of what might happen potentially in the longer term, but that's still a longer term. It would be sequenced in 3 phases. The first 2 phases, each of roughly 6 weeks, in which you would see in the first phase a swap of prisoners and hostages, some removal of the Israeli Defense Forces, and provision of safe harbors for food and water. The second phase, according to Hamas, the Israeli Defense Forces would leave Gaza, and you would have more exchange of hostages and prisoners. And then in the third phase, which would presumably be a continuation of the ceasefire, if not a peace, you would begin reconstruction, and it would be overseen by the United Nations and Arab nations, likely to include Egypt, which of course is a neighbor, and Qatar, which has played a role in the peace negotiations up to now, and perhaps a couple of others, but this is all yet to be determined.
Well, thanks so much. I'm sorry we have to leave it there, Colin. We really appreciate your time.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Colin Robertson is a fellow at the Canadian Global Affairs Institute and a former Canadian diplomat. Well, we're coming up on local news time, and still to come in the show, Jeremy Skibicki has admitted to killing 4 women. His lawyers say their client is not criminally responsible. We'll find out what that means from a law professor. As well, a low-maintenance lawn with the help of native plants. We'll hear about an event where you can learn about some hardy alternatives to grass. And if you're seeing anything out there on the roads that we need to share with our audience, please give us a call on the traffic line 204-788-3093. The news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it's mostly cloudy. We're at 14 degrees right now in downtown Winnipeg. Becoming cloudy around noon with a few showers this afternoon. That wind is going to whip up again. A high today of 17. A legal expert says Jeremy Skibicki's lawyers could face an uphill battle proving their client is not criminally responsible in the deaths of 4 women. Skibicki's lawyers now say he admits to killing all 4 women, but they will argue he is not criminally responsible due to a mental disorder. Brandon Trask teaches law at the University of Manitoba, specializing in NCR cases. He is not involved in the Skibicki trial. Trask says there will be a significant onus on the defense.
The defense is going to have to show, on a balance of probabilities, that Mr. Skibicki suffered from a disease of the mind at the time, and that by suffering from the disease of the mind at the time, he was either incapable of appreciating the nature and quality of the acts, or of knowing that they were wrong, morally wrong. And again, they've got to show that times 4 in this case.
Trask adds NCR cases typically involve offenses done over a short period of time. But Winnipeg police have said they believe Skibicki killed the women over 2 months in 2022. The 4 victims are Rebecca Contois, Morgan Harris, Mercedes Myron, and an unidentified woman given the name Buffalo Woman. The trial of Jeremy Skibicki resumes tomorrow. Manitoba PCs accuse the NDP government of briefly reneging on a promise to hire all graduating paramedics. PC health critic Kathleen Cook says some paramedicine graduates were told they had no jobs waiting for them. The problem was the result of the timing of exams. Health Minister Uzoma Asseguera says the timing of those exams and the hiring of paramedics will be coordinated in the future. Manitoba Shared Health confirms 14 graduates were affected. She says all have since been offered jobs. As rural communities in Manitoba and across Canada struggle to attract doctors, some physicians are offering tips on bringing family doctors to small towns and keeping them there. Dr. Sarah Giles is originally from Toronto, but a volunteer stint in the Northwest Territories got her hooked on rural medicine. She now lives and works in Kenora. Giles says there is a very small pool of recruitable rural doctors to begin with, so hometown solutions are needed.
If your community needs doctors, look at your high school students. Who of them could potentially be that rural doctor? We need to encourage people who get into medical school to have rural placements to have great experiences when they go on the rural placements.
Giles says communities should also make it easier for doctors to relocate, like helping them find housing and childcare and making sure they have support of other local healthcare providers. To the Mideast now, and Israeli tanks are now controlling the Palestinian side of the Rafah border crossing. The crossing between Egypt and southern Gaza is a critical lifeline. For aid groups, it is the main entry point and the only way out for wounded Palestinians. Israel's military says its troops are scanning the area. The IDF launched a ground and air operation in Rafah overnight. The European Union's top diplomat, Josep Borrell, is condemning that move.
In spite of this warning and these requests, the attack started yesterday night. I am afraid that this is going to cause again a lot of casualties, civilian casualties, whatever they say.
Qatar is sending a new team of negotiators to Cairo this morning. They are still trying to reach a ceasefire deal. Meanwhile, the United Nations aid officials say Israel is denying them access to the Rafah crossing, and they say the Israeli military is ignoring all warnings about what this will mean for humanitarian operations across Gaza. There's also concern the latest developments could derail ongoing ceasefire negotiations. Boeing called off its first spacecraft launch with astronauts because of a valve problem in the rocket last night. 2 NASA test pilots had just strapped into the Starliner capsule when the countdown was stopped just 2 hours before planned liftoff. Mark Nappy is with Boeing.
A lot of things got to go right, and it's not the majority of the things. Everything has to go right before we launch. And so something didn't go right today, and we will stand down. And when the experts tell us that we need to stand down, that's exactly what we do. And we'll get ready for the next opportunity.
That next opportunity for launch is rescheduled for Friday. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 7, and you can find more Manitoba news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Newsroom. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, worldwide on the CBC Listen app and on our website, as well as our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. I'm Emily Brass, in for Marcy Marcusa. Time for a look at the forecast now with Abby Adiemi.
Good morning once again. It's now 14 degrees in Winnipeg, still cloudy outside. We can anticipate a mix of sun and clouds today, and that's going to be getting thicker as we head towards the noon period, bringing a chance of a few showers. Also take into consideration the winds that will be coming from the southeast, and then it's going to become east gusting later in the morning. We'll be seeing a high of 17 today for Winnipeg. Now across the province, as mentioned earlier, we're going to be seeing sunnier skies in the northern part of the province, and the conditions for the southern part of the province is going to be more of like rain by the launch hour. In Brandon, it's currently 10 degrees, mostly cloudy out there. Expect showers later today. For folks in Brandon, expect about 5 to 10 millimeters of rain, and you'd get to a high of 14. Moving north to Thompson, it is 2 degrees with partly cloudy skies. Today will be sunny, and you'd see a high of 15. For folks in Churchill, it is currently -1 with mostly cloudy skies, but that cloudy sky is going to stick with you all day, and you get a high of +2. Down in Dauphin, it's currently 10 with cloudy skies. Anticipate mainly cloudy weather with a chance of showers late in the afternoon and a high of 17 today. Now for folks in Gimli, where it's at 12 degrees and cloudy, today we'll see a mix of sun and clouds with increased cloudiness later in the day and then some showers later. And the forecasted high for the Interlake region will be 15 degrees. Steinbach is currently at 13 with cloudy skies. Expect a mix of sun and clouds also. And then some, around the noon period, it's going to get thick, and then you'd see some showers. The high forecasted is 16. And finally in Morris, it is 13 degrees and cloudy. Today will be mainly cloudy with a few showers starting late morning, and then you'd get to a high of 16. We're looking at temperatures across board in the mid-teens today. Warmer weather on the horizon, that's what I would say.
Mm-hmm. And kind of windy today too.
Yeah,
by
that wind will it's going to be shifting, from southeast and then going east, and then it's going to be gusty. So there's going to be a lot of wind direction change today.
You got to just go with the flow.
Go with the flow.
Thank you, Abby. Abby.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Abby Adeyemi. And now with a look at the roads, Corey Funk is
Well,
here.
at least it's consistent in the commute in terms of consistently quiet so far this morning. Doesn't seem like there's much winds of change out there. So if you do see something going on, if you're walking, biking, driving, you want to let me know what you're seeing. Give me a call on that CBC commuter line, particularly what you're seeing. I'm curious to see if there's any updates on the Assiniboine River Trail, what's going on there, because I know the river's been rising after all these rains, and a little bit of that trail, I've heard, has been flooded, particularly west of the Donald Street Bridge, so heads up there. If you see something else going on, though, 204-788-3093.
It wouldn't be spring if it didn't flood a bit on the Assiniboine River Trail.
Exactly. The river's got to go for a walk on the trail, too.
Right. Maybe it'll help wash it off a little, too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Corey.
No problem.
That's our studio director, Corey Funk, and he also looks at the traffic. It is now 6:38. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM here in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass, and it's time now for some business news. Phil Dumont joins us with the CBC Business Report. Hi, Phil.
Hi, Emily.
So I see Lululemon is getting investigated by Canada's Competition Bureau. What's going on with that?
Yeah, the issue is whether the athletic gear retailer is lying when it says it's reducing greenhouse gases emitted by its operation. This is a practice known as greenwashing. It's where a company trumpets its record on reducing pollution from its factories or by its suppliers when, in fact, the improvements are minimal or non-existent. Now, right now, the Competition Bureau investigating Lululemon without publicly forming an opinion on the merits of the charge. Sometimes it'll say, we're investigating because we think wrongdoing is going on. In this case, they're just saying, look, we're looking at this, basically. So it's a bit up in the air. The move, though, might be the first step in an effort by the Bureau and Ottawa to go after greenwashing companies more aggressively. Canada's been criticized in the past by environmental groups for being too lax when it comes to investigating this types of false advertising, and that's how you get the greenwashers, false advertising. That's the rules they'd be violating. Past 2 years, the Competition Bureau has opened 8 investigations into the practice, but the biggest fine I could find was $2 million levied against Keurig Canada for saying its coffee pods could be recycled when they couldn't. Now, it depends upon how you define greenwashing, but other governments have penalized more companies and by larger amounts than Canada. The U.S. government fined Volkswagen about $2.8 billion maybe a decade ago for falsifying test results from its diesel engines. Deutsche Bank was hit for $25 million by Washington concerning faulty claims about its environmental investing. On the other hand, Ottawa can spend years investigating these greenwashing complaints, and that's even a problem for businesses because they say, look, we want clear rules on what is and what isn't permitted.
Interesting. So moving now to housing, and there's been a lot of pushback about Canada's high immigration levels and the effect of that on housing. What do these higher numbers mean for the job market?
Yeah, it's interesting because both countries, Canada and the U.S., face a possible shortage of, if I can use the term, native-born workers. Some people argue wages are too low, so you're not getting enough people into the workforce, pay more. Others argue past birth rates were too low, we don't have enough young people. But regardless, governments in Canada and the U.S. have been turning to more foreign workers to fill these vacant slots. A new report out of the U.S. calculates that immigrants to that country make up about 20% of the workforce. That translates into more than 5 million men and women from other countries added to the American labor pool. Those extra hands could increase American national income by $7 trillion over 10 years. In this country, immigrants in 2022, anyway, made up about 27.5% of the workforce. Ottawa says, though, last year almost the entire increase in the labor force was due to non-Canadian workers, foreign workers. Unions have argued that all these extra people tend to keep wages too low. Businesses say, though, look, we got about 500,000 unfilled jobs already, so reducing the level of foreign workers would exacerbate that problem. And as an economic proposition, I found a 2023 paper by the Bank of Canada said foreign workers increased the country's gross domestic product by more than 2 percentage points between the beginning of 2022 and the middle of last year.
Okay. And now we'll look at the business of the paranormal, something we don't often discuss in business news. More than a century ago, seances were the hot new thing. How might they be making a comeback in the digital age?
Yeah, through artificial intelligence. Back in the late 1800s, a movement sprang up where people would hold seances to speak with a dead relative. And they became popular to the degree that even Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, was big into this. Now you can use AI, specifically various chatbots, to talk to a relative who passed. A woman in Illinois uses AI to ask her deceased husband what to make for dinner. There's a tech guy in Alabama who cloned his father's voice and tells him a story from the son's childhood. And there's a Newfoundland psychologist I found who can see her late spouse playing a guitar whenever she wants. Actually, similar technology has been around for about the past decade or so. I found a 2019 startup, for instance, that lets you create an avatar of your loved ones. Now, all of this has a creepy feel to it. One expert said, look, it's one thing to keep an old voice message from a loved one around that you can listen to periodically. It's another to have that person utter words that they never actually said when they were alive. On the other hand, maybe what you remember is the person's last painful days, especially with Alzheimer's parents, or your memories can fade over time. With AR, this type of technology, you can always remember the person as the way you want to remember them.
So many questions there. We'll have to have a deep dive and discussion on this later, Phil. So in the meantime, what's happening in the market so far this morning?
Right now, a good day in Europe. UK up more than 1%. Germany, France up as well. The Nikkei in Japan was up 1.5%, and so was the Shanghai market. Oil's down 35 cents, $78.14 a barrel. And finally, the Canadian dollar, I've got it down about 1/10 of a cent, trading at 73 1/10 of a cent U.S.
Thank you, Phil.
Thanks, Emily.
That was Phil DeMont with the CBC Business News.
On the topics that matter, your voice should be heard.
I'm really concerned.
And I'm not really happy about that.
Radio Noon is where you can voice your take. I'm Janet Stewart. From 12:30 to 1 p.m., Radio Noon opens the phone lines on one important topic.
It just brings everyone together.
Radio Noon's call-in segment, 204-780-0893. We want to hear from you, weekdays on CBC.
Coming up on 6:45, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel and on the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. Well, when John McKeel bought a reel-to-reel tape recording machine, it came with a surprise. A tape with fragments of music by another artist. It sent John on a new creative trajectory, using fragments of other voices in his music as if they were ghosts. See if you can hear them. This is John McKeel with Hex.
Shadow standing next to me, so true, maybe I can see dark matter and the destiny. Put the hex on. Good eye has a lot to lend you. Some people maybe I can see in the midnight of my mind. They put a hex on. They put a hex on me. Put a hex on. Put a hex on me. Put a hex on. Put the hex on me. Put the hex on. Put the hex on me. Standing next to me, so real for the eye to see. Raw mineral ecstasy, put the hex on. 2 nights in the undertow, new vision only I can see. More time to align the mind, get the head right. Put the hex on me. 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 standing next to the hex on. So true, maybe I can put the hex on. Dark matter and the destiny. The hex on. Shadow standing next to the hex on. So true, maybe I can put the hex on. Dark matter and the destiny. The hex on. Shadow standing next to the hex on. So true, maybe I can put the hex on. Dark matter and the destiny. The hex on. Shadow standing next to the hex on. So true, maybe I can see. Dark matter and the destiny. Put the hex on.
Cool vibes from Bay Vert, New Brunswick. That was John McKeel with Hex. His new album of the same name is out now. It's coming.
Massey Hall, the most iconic music venue in Canada. An absolute milestone in the careers of musicians who stand on the historic stage. And you have a front row seat. The Beaches, Charlotte Cardin, William Prince, Jeremy Dutcher, July Talk, and more. CBC Music Live at Massey Hall, now available on CBC Jam.
Thank you, Toronto!
Something strange is happening in Canada. Kleenex is taking a powder. A certain peanut butter is skipping town. And why is the Colonel burying bland fries? Disappearing acts when popular brands are discontinued on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland and on the CBC Listen app.
Coming up on 10 minutes to 7, you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. Quick look at the forecast. A mix of sun and cloud today, becoming cloudy around noon with a few showers, and it's going to be windy. Gusts up to 60 kilometers an hour this morning, high 17. A few showers this evening that'll end, and then it'll become cloudy. Still kind of breezy with a low of 11, and for tomorrow, clearing in the morning, breezy with a high of 23. Well, still to come on Information Radio. They're small, green, and easy to take care of. We'll learn about an event at the Living Prairie Museum where you can discover some hassle-free alternatives to grass. As well, pro-Palestinian protesters are sending messages to universities in Canada. They want universities to divest from companies with ties to Israel. But how hard is divesting? How does it work? We'll speak to an expert on that. Coming up first, though, in the House of Commons late yesterday, the Liberal government tabled C-70. The proposed legislation is framed as countering foreign interference. The act follows the release this past Friday of an interim report by Justice Marie-Josée Hogue. As commissioner, the justice is heading a public inquiry into the role of foreign interference in the 2019 and 2021 federal elections. The interim report said foreign interference did not affect which political party formed government in those elections. Nevertheless, the report has also noted that the electoral system in this country is not free from coercion or covert influence. Joining us now is Ryan Tumulty, a parliamentary reporter with the National Post. Good morning, Ryan.
Good morning.
So tell us about the legislation tabled late yesterday. What's notable about it?
Yeah, so, a lot of focus, a lot of expectations coming into this was that it would include a foreign agent registry, and it does. But it is much broader than that. So there are some big changes here to the CSIS Act, the law that oversees that spy agency. So there are some changes to how they go about getting warrants for their surveillance. There are some changes to who they can share information with. Right now, they're not really allowed to share information outside the federal government. And that means they've had reasons for concern with provincial or municipal governments. And they haven't been able to share that, nor have they been able to share when they think, they have concerns about what might be happening inside a private company. And so those are all big changes. And then there's also a requirement in this legislation that CSIS Act gets reviewed regularly, that future governments will have to take another look. And I think, that has been a big concern of people around CSIS and in CSIS, that their legislation hasn't kept up to date. It was written 40 years ago. So much about the world has changed in that time. Digital technology, different adversaries, different concerns. So that is a really big, significant set of changes that I think, will be very interesting to watch.
No kidding. What do we know about how this registry will work?
Yeah, so this registry is going to be overseen by an independent commissioner. And the goal here is basically if you are working for a foreign state, a foreign entity, if you are trying to advance some sort of public policy and you're spending money towards that goal, if you sort of check all of those boxes, you're going to have to register. If you don't, there are potentially fines and even criminal sanctions for that. And, you know, the goal here is just to provide that higher level of transparency, especially around things in the democratic process. So the legislation is quite clear that, you know, when it comes to influence, what they're looking for is people, for example, trying to push a piece of legislation through the House of Commons or provincial legislature trying to, you know, encourage a bill there, maybe trying to have a candidate nominated. You know, issues like that would require registration. And so that's trying to bring some transparency to some of those concerns there.
Were you surprised by anything the Liberals included in this proposed legislation?
Yeah, you know, I would say one thing that, you know, I hadn't heard much talk of but is in the bill is some other changes to sort of existing foreign interference, foreign influence legislation. So making those laws clearer, making it tougher in some cases. You know, there's laws on the books that only see foreign influence a crime if it's successful. And so, you know, that's changed to make it so that even attempting to influence, you know, Canadians in a covert or deceptive manner would be illegal, whether or not you succeed in it or not. There are changes to the laws around sabotage, which of course is not a law we hear about very much, but has actually cropped up in Europe. We've seen cases in Europe where there were sabotage directed towards the, you know, effort to support Ukraine. So it's a set of changes of laws we don't think about that often, but that are also included in this bill.
Well, the final report from Commissioner Marie-Josée Hogue doesn't come out until the end of the year. But what can you tell us about why this bill is being introduced now?
You know, I think they were really trying to time it to the report that came out on Friday. That first report that we've read is all about what happened in 2019 and 2021. It's really all about the controversies that have dogged the Liberals on this file since the story first started breaking, you know, a year and a half ago. So I think they wanted to show a very clear, very concise response to that right away. That second report, which we were expecting by the end of the year, it is going to detail some recommendations about how to deal with this problem more broadly. I think, you know, potentially that may lead to changes to this bill or to other legislation. But I think the government didn't want to wait for 6 months to be sort of responding to the foreign influence problem. I think they wanted to get out in front of it right away.
And just in the last 30 seconds or so, Ryan, what are you going to be watching for in the coming days on this foreign interference file?
Well, you know, we've talked all about this issue of foreign interference and the commission and this new legislation, but there was a huge foreign interference story that also came down on Friday when the RCMP announced these arrests in the killing of Hardeep Singh Najjar, the BC Sikh activist. Now, his case is the case where the Prime Minister stood in the House of Commons and said they had credible allegations that the Indian government was involved. You know, the RCMP didn't confirm that when they made their arrests, but they said they're still investigating. They expect more arrests, and they certainly didn't rule it out. So I think that's a very interesting story to be watching, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get more news on it this week.
Thanks so much for joining us and breaking this down, Ryan.
No problem.
Ryan Tumulty is a parliamentary reporter with the National Post. It is just a few minutes ahead of national news time. Time for Manitoba news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, a legal expert says Jeremy Skibicki's lawyers could face an uphill battle proving their client is not criminally responsible in the deaths of 4 women. Skibicki's lawyers now say he admits to killing all 4. Brandon Trask at the University of Manitoba says not criminally responsible cases typically involve offenses done over a short period of time, but Winnipeg police have said they believe Skibicki killed the women over a span of 2 months in 2022. Rural doctors are offering their advice for small towns struggling to attract and retain physicians. Dr. Sarah Newberry is a family physician in Marathon, Ontario, and she urges communities develop creative, homegrown solution to keeping rural doctors. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba News Desk. A mix of sun and cloud today, becoming cloudy around noon with a few showers, windy with a high of 17. And Corey Funk has a look at the traffic.
You just got a call from Ellen on the commuter line. Northbound Moray Bridge in the right-hand lane. There's a bit of construction going on there. That's already caused some backups, she says. So keep left to get around that if you're heading northbound on the Moray Bridge heading towards Portage this morning. If you see something else, though, give me a call. Be like Ellen, 204-788-3093.
Thank you, Corey. That's CBC's Corey Funk. Well, still to come, pro-Palestinian protesters are sending messages to universities in Canada. They want the schools to divest from companies with ties to Israel. But how hard is divesting and how does it work? We're going to speak to an expert on that as well. We'll hear about low-maintenance lawns with the help of native plants. We'll hear about an event where you can learn about some of the healthy alternatives to grass. That's all still to come on Information Radio. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. You're listening to CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel and the CBC Listen app. World Report is up next.
On the Current.
It's kind of surprising that a place that's meant for health doesn't serve healthy food.
Hospitals are known for their bad food, so much so that, like airplane food, it's a cliche. But one Vancouver hospital is working with a chef to change that and give patients meals that are diverse, delicious, and actually healing. That's coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. 3 members of an alleged hit squad are due in a BC court today. They are accused of taking part in the murder of Sikh activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. All are Indian citizens. All face first-degree murder and conspiracy charges. The Prime Minister alleges this killing was orchestrated by the Indian government. Georgie Smythe has more.
It's one of the rare times I'm reading local criminal news for the first time on my New York Times app.
As Vancouver criminal lawyer Brock Martland knows, there's significant interest around the case of murdered Sikh separatist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. The temple leader was gunned down outside his Surrey Gurdwara in June last year. Police said they were working on a months-long investigation. Then on Friday, this.
We arrested and charged 3 individuals.
After being taken into custody in Edmonton, Kamalpreet Singh, Karanpreet Singh and Karan Brar were charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. They're facing a court via video link in Greater Vancouver today. But the cases are far more reaching than most criminal proceedings. Last year in the House of Commons, the Prime Minister shared what he called credible allegations of a potential link between the killing and the Indian government. Martland says with claims like that, the evidence that could be presented in court will be intriguing.
Is it purely a police investigation here in the Vancouver area that's built up a body of evidence? Is it informed by or does it draw on evidence gathered by CSIS, the CIA, Five Eyes, other sources?
Police have emphasised their investigation is ongoing and there may be more arrests in the future. Georgie Smythe, CBC News, Vancouver.
Gaza is once again sealed off from most of the world. Israel says it has closed off the Kerem Shalom border crossing for security reasons. And to the south, the IDF has taken control of the Rafah crossing. It is part of Israel's long-promised military offensive in that city. About 1.4 million Palestinians are sheltering there. Dominic Velitis has the latest.
Footage released by the Israeli Defense Forces this morning shows its tanks on patrol at the Rafah crossing. It claims it's now taken operational control of the Palestinian side of the border with Egypt, which has been pivotal for the delivery of aid into Gaza. In a statement, the Gaza Crossings Authority says Israel's takeover is a death sentence for Gazans. Louise Wateridge is a spokesperson for UNRWA, the UN agency for Palestinian refugees. On the BBC, she warned diminished aid supplies will have a devastating effect on Gaza's population.
The biggest problem we have in the last 24 to 48 hours is the border crossing and not having enough aid supplies come in, and a part of that is fuel. The whole humanitarian operation here in the Gaza Strip relies on fuel. So the fact that we have not had either of those things in the last 24 to 48 hours is extremely concerning.
This morning, Israeli warplanes struck again in eastern Rafah. Palestinian health officials say 20 people were killed in air and land strikes last night. Meanwhile, ceasefire talks are set to resume in Cairo. Hamas said it would accept a deal drawn up by Egyptian mediators. The precise details are not known, but it has already been rejected by Israel as far from meeting its core demands. And although the country's war cabinet has voted to continue operations on the ground in Gaza, it has agreed to send a delegation to the talks in Egypt. Dominic Velitis, CBC News, London.
2 people have been killed in a knife attack in a Chinese hospital. Another 21 people are injured. It happened in the southwestern Yunnan province. Doctors may be among the injured. Police say the suspect is male and from the county where the hospital is located. For the 5th time, Vladimir Putin is sworn in as Russia's president.
Клянусь при осуществлении полномочий президента Российской Федерации.
Putin taking his oath of office and kicking off another 6-year-long term as president. He won more than 87% of the vote in March. Though critics point out he had no serious challengers, many complained that the vote was neither free or fair. During his inauguration speech, Putin said he would be open to relations with other countries, but today's ceremony was boycotted mostly by Western nations, including Canada, the U.S., and the U.K. Putin's inauguration comes as his war in Ukraine is in its 27th month. Millions of Indians are heading to the polling stations today for the 3rd phase of that country's general election. Crowds cheering outside as Prime Minister Narendra Modi cast his ballot in the western state of Gujarat. Modi is seeking a 3rd straight term. This vote puts his Hindu Nationalist Party up against an opposition alliance. Surveys suggest he will win a majority when the votes are counted in June, but many, including Modi, are concerned about voter turnout. The intense heatwave conditions could force potential voters to stay home. In recent days, temperatures soared above 40 degrees Celsius in many parts of India. Flooding in Brazil may stop the beautiful game for now. 3 top-tier clubs are calling on Brazil's Soccer Federation to suspend all National League matches for the next 20 days. Those clubs are all based in the state of Rio Grande do Sul. It has been inundated with water. Authorities say 83 people have died in the past week. More than 100 others are missing. The club say soccer cannot be the priority right now when nearly 80,000 people are out of their homes. Northvolt is ramping up security at the site of its future EV battery plant in Quebec. The company says construction crews found what it calls homemade incendiary devices. There were containers filled with flammable liquids. Nothing caught fire, but as Jennifer Yoon reports, this is just the latest instance of vandalism at the controversial worksite.
The homemade Molotov cocktails were found under heavy machinery at a multi-billion-dollar electric vehicle battery plant being built 30 kilometers east of Montreal. Paolo Cerruti, CEO of Northvolt, says the company is stepping up security.
What these people want to achieve is to scare us, is to dissuade us from going forward. Well, they are obtaining exactly the opposite results.
This is just the latest instance of vandalism on site. In January, an anonymous group claimed responsibility for driving nails into nearby trees set to be cut down, saying the battery plant will destroy woods and wetlands. Pierre Fitzgibbon, Quebec's Minister of Economy, called the tactics completely unacceptable, saying debate is always welcome but never violence.
If you
Sow the wind, you'll reap the storm.
Dora St. Pierre with environmental group Action Boreale condemns violence, but he says if the province listened to people's voices instead of fast-tracking the project, it could have avoided the fierce backlash.
The way they behaved in the Nordvolt project, that was not democratic at all.
St. Pierre says the government should have heeded the calls for an independent environmental assessment. Swedish manufacturer Northvolt says the battery plant will open by the end of 2026. Jennifer Yoon, CBC News, Montreal.
Canada Post is warning its finances are at a critical point. The country's national mail service lost more than $750 million last year. The Crown Corporation says without significant changes to its operating model, its losses will be unsustainable. Marina von Stackelberg reports.
As fewer letters end up in mailboxes, Canada Post says its financial situation is so grim it could run out of cash in less than a year. The Crown Corporation has lost money 6 years in a row, a total of $3 billion.
Financially, things are very challenging.
John Hamilton, a VP with the company, says revenues keep declining. And while online shopping has boomed, Canada Post is struggling to compete with new privately owned parcel companies. They hire cheaper gig workers who deliver packages on evenings and weekends. Hamilton says in a matter of years, Canada Post's share of the e-commerce market has been cut in half to just 29%.
We were doing a number of things to be able to better compete, but we didn't expect our market share to drop that quickly and for the competitors to take that much of the volume.
Hamilton says Canada Post is trying to persuade the federal government to change laws that mandate how and when it delivers mail to meet the needs of today's customers.
How frequently do we deliver? If you have a community mailbox, a lot of people check it once or twice a week.
Minister of Public Services Jean-Yves Duclos won't say if or how Ottawa will help.
It's a Crown organization, they know they're there to serve Canadians at the lowest possible cost.
This week, Canada Post did increase the price of a stamp to 99 cents. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg and worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel and on the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. Here's what's still to come on the show. They're small, green, and easy to take care of. We'll learn about an event at the Living Prairie Museum where you can discover some hassle-free alternatives to grass. Pro-Palestinian protesters are setting up an encampment this morning at the University of Manitoba, and one of their demands is for the university to divest from companies with ties to Israel. But how hard is that to do? An expert will join us to explain. But first, Jeremy Skibicki has admitted to killing 4 women. His lawyers say their client is not criminally responsible. What does that mean? A law professor will explain. All that's still to come on Information Radio. 11 minutes after 7, time for news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba PCs accused the NDP government of briefly reneging on a promise to hire all graduating paramedics. PC health critic Kathleen Cook says some paramedicine graduates were told they had no jobs waiting for them. The government blames the timing of exams, and the health minister says the timing of exams and hiring of paramedics will be coordinated in the future. We'll hear more coming up. As well, as rural communities struggle to attract doctors, some physicians are offering tips on bringing family doctors to small towns and keeping them. We'll hear that story as well coming up at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba News Desk. Time now for a look at the weather with Abby Adiemi.
Good morning once again. We are at 14 degrees in the city. It is cloudy outside. We can expect a mix of sun and clouds throughout the day, and by noon period, we should see the clouds gathering, bringing with them showers. A high for today will reach around 17 degrees with some breezy conditions coming with that. And as we we move into the evening hours, the showers will gradually taper off, leaving us under cloudy skies. The winds coming from the east will diminish as the night progresses. And of course, tonight the showers will be tapering off. Across the province, the north will enjoy sunnier skies, while the south just brace for that showers that will be coming after the noon period, starting here in Winnipeg and moving northward in the afternoon period. Brandon is currently at 11, Thompson is at 2 degrees, Dauphin is at 10, Steinbach at Morris hovering around 13 degrees, and we'll see a mix of sun and clouds today. Also showers it's on the menu for them.
Okay, thank you, Abby.
You're welcome.
And Corey Funk is here now with an update on the traffic.
Yes, only really one issue I've heard so far from Ellen on the commuter line. She phoned northbound Moray Bridge just before Portage, right at the north part of the bridge there. In the right-hand lane, there's some construction, so keep left to get around that. She said there's already some backups starting, so it may be a little bit slow going on northbound Moray Bridge this morning. But if you see something else going on, give me a call. If you're walking, biking, driving, seems like overall a pretty lovely morning. Actually, Down on a Bike also called, said it was his first short sleeve bike ride of the year. So that's a big milestone for a lot of active commuters. So if you see something going on and or you want to tell me how great your commute was, I'm happy with that too. 204-788-3093.
13 minutes after 7 o'clock, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, and on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel and the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass. Well, as you've been hearing in the news, Jeremy Skibicki has admitted to killing 4 women. The trial was set to be heard by a jury, but now it'll be heard by a judge alone, no jury, something his defense lawyers have been fighting for. Skibicki admitted to killing 4 women, but he's pleading not guilty to first-degree murder in the deaths of Morgan Harris, Mercedes Myron, and Rebecca Contois, as well as a 4th woman given the name Buffalo Woman. She has not yet been identified. Skibicki's lawyers plan to argue he's not criminally responsible. Harris's cousin Melissa Robinson said she was relieved to hear the latest developments. CBC's Josh Crabb spoke with her yesterday outside the courthouse.
We're super ecstatic, exactly what we wanted. It's been all about justice for my cousin, and we're going to get it.
The Crown said this isn't a reflection of their faith in the jury system, this development today. Does it change how you feel now that this case is essentially in the hands of a judge alone?
We're okay with it. convincing 12 versus our judge. Either way, we were pretty confident. We've sat down many times with the Crowns. They explained everything to us ahead of time. So either way, we were confident, but, even more happier now that it's judge alone because, as you sit in the courtroom, you see he's having no patience with the defense whatsoever. This man has killed 4 of our women, and he will be held responsible.
Now, as we touched on, Skibicki's lawyers plan to argue he's not criminally responsible, but what exactly does that mean and how will it affect the trial? Brandon Trask is an assistant professor at the Faculty of Law at the University of Manitoba, and he joins us now. Hi, Brandon.
Hi, Emily.
So what does it mean for someone to be found not criminally responsible?
Yes, so not criminally responsible is a special verdict. And so, in this case, because the defense is raising the prospect of an NCR special verdict, essentially the onus is on the defense here to show on a balance of probabilities that Mr. Skibicki was suffering from a, quote, disease of the mind at the time, and also that this disease of the mind rendered him incapable of either appreciating the nature and quality of the act or knowing that the act was wrong. And in this particular case, of course, with Mr. Skibicki, they'll have to show that in relation to all 4 killings over a presumably longer period of time than we would normally see in a typical NCR case.
And so how did you react when you learned his lawyers plan to argue he wasn't criminally responsible?
Yeah, I was somewhat surprised just given that I think this is going to be a real challenge for the defense to establish because, again, the onus is on the defense and they have to show, 50% plus 1 chance, so balance of probabilities that he was NCR. So essentially now, the Crown will get to essentially just poke holes in the defense case for this. So I expect we'll see a number of experts called, expert witnesses, but also, a lot of the evidence, I'm sure, will still be quite relevant to this discussion, this argument, both ways about whether Mr. Skibicki should be found NCR or not.
And you touched on some of the challenges the defense might face going forward with proving he's not criminally responsible. But what about the Crown? What are some of the challenges they might face?
Well, so arguably the biggest hurdle from the Crown's perspective was surpassed yesterday with Mr. Skibicki's, from my perspective, surprise move in acknowledging that he was the one who killed these 4 individuals. And so, now the Crown does not have to prove that aspect, of course, so they can just sort of sit back and like I said, poke holes, call rebuttal evidence, essentially combating what the defense evidence is on this NCR topic. Now that this trial is just focused on the NCR issue going forward.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we learned yesterday the trial will be tried by judge alone. The defense has been fighting for that, but it all hinged on that admission by Skibicki that he did kill the 4 women. What did you think when you heard about all that?
Yeah, I think it was a very sensible move on the part of the Crown to consent yesterday to a judge alone trial going forward. Especially in light of the fact that really the only remaining issue is this NCR issue, and that can be both very technical and very logistically challenging going forward. So, I suspect that we're in for some interesting twists and turns in the coming weeks. But, these cases do not always proceed in sort of a linear fashion once you get to focusing on the NCR aspect. So now that the issue is narrowed in on that, I think it's very sensible to have a judge-alone trial going forward.
How common is that for, someone to be arguing they're not criminally responsible? Like, are there some cases that stand out for you on that?
Yeah, obviously the Vince Lee case in Manitoba is one of the highest profile NCR cases, but yeah, it's still quite rare. But what makes this case very unique is the defense is arguing for an NCR verdict in a situation where you've got multiple victims, right, spread out over a period of time. So, in the cases that I can think of where we've seen NCR advanced and advanced successfully in the past, even in those rare cases where there are multiple victims, usually the time period is much more condensed than what I think we're likely to hear about going forward. Given all of the discussion that's been in the media thus far.
Mm. Are there any misconceptions you've heard about these kind of cases where a suspect says they're not, criminally responsible that maybe you would want to explain to people?
Yeah, I think, it's important for Canadians to realize an NCR verdict, if there is one in this case, and again, I think this is going to be a big challenge for defense to establish that. But even if there is an NCR verdict, that doesn't mean, necessarily that Mr. Skibicki would be released ever, or certainly anytime soon. So once somebody's found NCR, they're referred to as an NCR accused, and they end up under the purview of the Criminal Code Review Board. And there's also been a significant change in the legislation since that Vince Lee case that I mentioned. The Crown can ask for a high-risk NCR accused designation, and that essentially takes some powers away from the Criminal Code Review Board. And so that means essentially, if there's ever a thought about giving an absolute discharge, so essentially releasing somebody on no conditions going forward, that could only be done through the courts if somebody's an high-risk NCR accused. As opposed to through the Criminal Code Review Board. So I think, again, the term NCR is, I think, largely misunderstood, and also the implications of that are largely misunderstood.
So, Brandon, with your, deeper understanding of these legal proceedings, what are you going to be watching for as this case goes ahead?
Yeah, I think I will definitely be watching for not only the expert opinions that we're going to hear from experts called by both sides, but also how the evidence lines up. So, I suspect it will still be quite necessary to get into a number of the details of the evidence because, I imagine that the Crown will be trying to show, actually, there are all these indications, all these hallmarks that Mr. Skibicki, was fully aware of what he was doing. So I think that we're going to hear, arguments on that point specifically to see, okay, you've heard there may or may not have been a disease of the mind at play, but, did this rise to the level of meaning that he was completely incapable of knowing that what he was doing was wrong, or of knowing the nature and consequences of the act, like essentially what would flow from his actions. So I think that's where, all of these arguments relating to state of mind also have to tie to the evidence.
Well, thanks for joining us to shine a light on what this all means, Brandon.
Thanks so much, Emily.
Brandon Trask is an assistant professor at the Faculty of Law in the University of Manitoba.
Our community.
Those who shape this place come from all walks of life.
Some of us you hear every day.
And others are working hard to make Manitoba a better place.
The movers and shakers.
The change makers. The people making a difference.
And CBC Manitoba is where you'll hear their stories.
CBC Winnipeg News at 6.
Information radio. Up to speed.
Radio News. CBC.ca/Manitoba.
Watch, listen, experience Manitoba.
23 minutes after 7 o'clock, you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. And speaking of the change makers, CBC is looking to highlight leaders, success stories, and change makers in Manitoba under the age of 40. Do you know someone who's giving back to Manitobans, making our province's future a little bit brighter? Maybe that person is even you. We want to highlight the top 10 young people who are over 18 and under 40 and have a passion for Manitoba and are working to make a difference in all sorts of ways. You can nominate someone for a CBC Manitoba Future 40 Award by visiting cbc.ca/future40mb, and that's the number 40. 40MB. Nominations will be accepted until May 10th. That's Friday at midnight. So to submit, visit cbc.ca/future40MB. And it is coming up on 25 minutes after 7 o'clock, and that means it's time for a look at sports. Scott Regehr joins us now. Hi, Scott.
Hey there, Emily.
So it's the end of a coaching era. What are your thoughts on Rick Bowness calling it a career?
Wow. Just immense. 38 seasons as an NHL head or assistant coach. That amounts to 2,726 games, which is more than anybody in history. He is the definition of a hockey lifer when it comes to coaching, but he's also the definition of a dedicated husband, Emily. His partner, his wife, Judy, they've been together for 53 years, and as Rick Bowness was telling his stories around his retirement yesterday with the media, he turned to his wife, Judy, and said, "This is your fault." Meanwhile, he was in the midst of tears and saying that jokingly, of course. Here's more from Rick.
Winning the Stanley Cup, it's always been important, but over the years, as you age, you hope you have an impact on your players' lives. Off the ice, on the ice, you get close to the cup, you lose, and you say, God, we're healthy, we could have won that. Well, that's out of your control. As a coach, you can control how you deal with the players every day, and that's helping them on the ice, and you hope that you teach them some life lessons along the way as well.
When Kevin Cheveldayoff called Rick Bowness to Winnipeg to coach the team, he was already going to retire at that point. And since coming to Winnipeg, I mean, in his first season, a bout of COVID, you might recall, felled Rick Bowness for some time. Then this past season, Judy, his wife, suffered a middle-of-the-night seizure, which really caused them a great deal of issues. So, I mean, this has been a really intense time for the Bownesses in Winnipeg, but one that he clearly will relish. He says he couldn't have come to a better place to finish his career. And with 52 wins this season with the Jets, right at near his 70th birthday, Rick Bowness sets a career high. Just an amazing career. And if you didn't see Kevin Bieksa's tribute to him on Hockey Night in Canada, he used to be a player of Bowness's, I think, when they were in Vancouver. Check it out. It underscores just how much Rick Bowness has meant to so many.
Nice words from him, too, here at the end for Winnipeg. So we wish Rick and his wife the best. Now, moving over to basketball, frustrating times for a Canadian NBA champion?
Yeah, disappointed with the officiating last night, Emily. Kitchener, Ontario's Jamal Murray threw a heat pack out onto the floor during Denver's loss to Minnesota.
Whoa.
The defending champion Nuggets now trail that series 2-0, and Murray has been able to do very little about it. He's nursing a sore calf muscle, thus the heat pack, and scored a mere 8 points last night. Murray's pocketbook could be taking a beating soon, too. Not only did he throw that heat pack, he also made a gesture to the referees, rubbing his fingertips together, suggesting they were on the take. So cue a very large fine, I would think, by the NBA. Meantime, away from the court, Brittany Griner's long-awaited book comes out today, titled Coming Home. It documents the WNBA star's experience being trapped inside Russia's infamous criminal justice system. Speaking with PBS, Griner says when she was found with a small amount of cannabis oil in her bags at a Moscow airport, she never could have imagined becoming a pawn in a vicious geopolitical battle.
There's no doubt in my mind that once they knew who I was and they had me, that I'm your valued target, I'm your valued, bargaining chip. You don't feel like a human anymore. Like, I didn't feel like my life was mine. It was in someone else's hands. It was in other people's hands. It's a feeling that I never want to feel ever again.
Brittany Griner's book, Coming Home, out today.
What an ordeal for her. Meanwhile, rookie camp for the Bombers opens tomorrow, and when it does, there'll be a familiar face on the field. Tell us about that.
Yeah, for one day only, Bomber legend Milt Stegall, Emily, is going to be taking part in training camp. He's 54 now, Milt, doesn't look it. But this idea first dawned on him around his 50th birthday. He says his wife thought he was crazy, and she still thinks he's crazy, but Stegall wants to do this.
I'm excited and nervous. It's like my first training camp. That's what I feel like. I don't know what to expect. I don't know what's going to happen. But I'm just going to go out there and enjoy myself and have a good time. I'm playing with house money, as they say. I want to wake up and have that training camp soreness. That's something I've been longing for 16 years. There's nothing else like it. So I'm hoping when I wake up Thursday morning, I'm walking around like an old man because I'm so sore. So that's what I'm really looking forward to.
10:30 tomorrow morning on the field beside Winnipeg Soccer Federation South, the event open for fans. I'm sure that might be well attended.
Sounds like a good time. Thanks so much, Scott.
You betcha.
That's Scott Regehr with the CBC Sports Desk. Time for now for the news.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 7:30. It's a mild start to the day, mostly cloudy, 14 now. We're not going to be as warm as yesterday, though. A high of 17. The wind is going to pick up and becoming cloudy with some showers expected this afternoon. A legal expert says Jeremy Skibicki's lawyers could face an uphill battle, proving their client is not criminally responsible in the deaths of 4 women. Skibicki's lawyers now say he admits to killing all 4, but they will argue he is not criminally responsible due to a mental disorder. Brandon Trask, an assistant law professor at the University of Manitoba, says NCR cases typically involve offenses done over a short period of time. But Winnipeg police have said they believe Skibicki killed the women over a span of 2 months in 2022.
Now you've got a potentially much longer period of time across the span of 4 killings. I think that's a real uphill battle for the defense in this case. It's going to be interesting to see what they try to put forward, proving that on a balance of probabilities.
Trask says the defense will have to prove Skibicki had a mental disease that made him unable to understand what he was doing or that it was wrong. Skibicki is on trial for the deaths of Rebecca Contois, Morgan Harris, Mercedes Myron, and a 4th unidentified woman given the name Buffalo Woman. Rural doctors are offering their advice for small towns struggling to attract and retain physicians. Dr. Sarah Newberry is a family physician in Marathon, Ontario. She's also an associate dean at the Northern Ontario School of Medicine. She urges communities to develop creative, homegrown solutions to keeping rural doctors.
That's an investment that has appeal to new clinicians now. Because what they want is to feel like they've got some work-life balance. They want to feel supported, and they want to feel connected to the community.
Newberry says surrounding a doctor with supportive nurses, technicians, and other staff can also have an impact in retaining that doctor. Manitoba PCs accuse the NDP government of briefly reneging on a promise to hire all graduating paramedics. PC health critic Kathleen Cook says some paramedicine graduates were told they had no jobs waiting for them. The problem was the result of the timing of exams. Manitoba's health minister, Uzoma Asseguera, says the timing and the hiring of paramedics will be coordinated in the future. Manitoba Shared Health confirms 14 graduates were affected and says all have since been offered jobs. The executive director of the Jewish Heritage Center says it has been a long wait, but she is thrilled to see mandated Holocaust education in Manitoba. Yesterday, on Holocaust Remembrance Day, the province gave details on ensuring education on anti-Semitism, racism, and inequality issues will be taught in social studies. Belle Jarneski is with the Heritage Center.
And I'm so pleased that the minister and the deputy minister listened and acted and understood the importance of Holocaust education, not just for our community, but for civil society.
This week, the Tour for Humanity, a mobile education center from the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center, is in Winnipeg. High school students will take part in presentations on the Holocaust and human rights. Israeli tanks now control the Palestinian side of the Rafah border crossing.
I am afraid that this is going to cause again a lot of casualties, civilian casualties, whatever they say.
Senior European Union diplomat Josef Borrell. The border crossing between Egypt and southern Gaza is a critical entry point for aid groups trying to get humanitarian aid into the territory. Shutting it down is part of the Israeli military's ground and air operation launched on Rafah overnight. In response, Qatar is sending a new team of negotiators to Cairo. It's part of the ongoing effort to establish a ceasefire agreement. Yesterday, Hamas approved the wording of the latest proposed deal, and now Israel is reviewing Hamas's response. You can hear the latest national and international news on World Report at 8. NASA scrapped a long-awaited test flight last night. The Boeing Starliner spacecraft was supposed to launch with a human crew. Officials blame a technical glitch with the rocket. Ken Bowersox is with NASA.
I know everybody was eager to see a launch. It would have been happening right about now, and probably feeling a little disappointed that we didn't get to see the launch. But all I want to say first is that good things are worth waiting for.
Boeing is the latest company to try to expand into the space business, trying to compete with SpaceX, founded by Elon Musk. You can find more news updated throughout your day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Well, it was probably good to just wait. If it's not ready, don't send people up there.
No, it's got to be perfect. This is a big deal.
No kidding. Thanks so much, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba Newsroom. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, filling in for Marcy Marcusa. It's 7:35, time for a look at the forecast with Abby Adiemi.
Good morning once again. The mercury is still stuck at 14 degrees in Winnipeg with cloudy skies overhead. Throughout the day, we can anticipate that blend of, you're still going to see some sunshine later and some clouds. Although the clouds will get thick as we approach the noon period, bringing along a possibility of some showers. So if you're stepping out or getting prepared for that period of the day, it's a good idea to prepare accordingly. And of course, the wind direction is going to be shifting from the southeast and then swinging east this morning with gusts expected. Our daily high is expected to peak at 17 degrees. And as we move into the evening period for Winnipeg, those showers will gradually taper off, leaving us with cloudy conditions. And then the winds will ease off and we'll see a low of 11 tonight. In Brandon, it's currently 10 degrees with mostly cloudy conditions. For folks in Brandon, we're expecting showers later today with about 5 to 10 millimeters of rain and a high of 14 degrees. Moving north to Thompson, it's currently 2 degrees with partly cloudy skies. Today will be sunny with a high of 15 degrees. Churchill is currently at -1 and mostly cloudy. We're expecting a cloudy day with a high of +2. Heading down to Dauphin, where it's currently 10 degrees, cloudy skies as the conditions over there. And it's going to be mainly cloudy for folks in Dauphin with a high chance of showers later this afternoon and a high of 17. Now for Gimli, Steinbach, and Morris, they're all hovering around 13 degrees with cloudy skies. Now the regions will expect a mix of sun and clouds, with the clouds getting thick by noon and then a few showers, and all three regions will definitely be seeing a high of 16. In summary, the forecast is seeing a mix of sun and clouds with showers around noon, and then the winds will pick up, showers will diminish, and then it's going to lead to a cloudy evening.
It's tough weather to prepare for, Abby.
I know, you're going to go, oh, it's going to look, oh, no, okay, now I need to get, oh, no.
Yeah, well, it's like you could wear a T-shirt now, but bring your raincoat because it's going to rain at noon, and don't use an umbrella because it's going to be too windy. Like, how do you get ready for that?
And I remember me preparing for, sometimes back in the day when I would prepare for such weather, and I just love my umbrella.
Yeah.
The problem with such weather is I forget the umbrella because I am always forgetting them wherever I go. So I hope you don't forget your umbrella today.
Yeah, good luck, everybody. Thank you, Abby.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Abby Adeyemi, and joining us now with a look at the roads is Corey Funk.
You and I both lived in Newfoundland. It's like a classic Newfoundland forecast. It's like just bring your whole wardrobe and just get ready for anything.
And always wear a ponytail because it's always windy there.
Yes, exactly. So far in the commute, just one issue that I've heard of so far from Ellen. Northbound Moray Bridge as you're approaching Portage. In the right lane, there's some construction that's already causing some backups for folks, says Ellen. So keep left to get around that. Maybe a bit slow going over the Moray Bridge going northbound. But if you see something else going on out there, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. Curious what you're seeing, particularly actually on the trails or the river trail. If you've been walking or biking on there, tell me what you're seeing, because I heard yesterday it was unbikeable west of the Donald Street Bridge. Curious what's changed today. So I'd love to get an update on that. Let me know. Call the commuter line, 204-788-3093.
Yes, we want that info. Call Corey. He's standing by.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
CBC's Corey Funk. It is now just about 20 minutes before 8 o'clock, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube page and on the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. Well, a yard of low-growing native plants can make for some low-maintenance lawn care. Coming up tomorrow evening, the Friends of the Living Prairie Museum are hosting an event to introduce people to some native plants that can be substituted for grass. Ash Burkowski is the group's president and is leading the workshop. CBC Manitoba community reporter Shanalee Vidal was at the Living Prairie Museum last night, where Burkowski took her on a native plant tour along with videographer Warren Kay.
So are these prairie crocuses?
They are prairie crocuses, yes. The trick is that they really need a very dry, very well-drained space, and they don't want extra watering once they're established. They really just need what comes from the sky and no more.
Looks like the soil is very sandy.
They really like it dry. Like, I cannot emphasize that more. So you can't mow them, but if you are growing them in a meadow space, it's perfect because they're not going to get any taller than that. So this is three-flowered avens. This is a really nice low-growing plant that has tiny little flowers that are pink that the bumblebees really love. And then after the flowers are done, they get these really beautiful poofy seed heads that are kind of pink with little pink plumes. It's called prairie smoke as well. And this stays evergreen, so the way that you're seeing it right now with the green leaves is how it pops up after winter. It's like immediately green, and it doesn't get very tall, so you don't really have to mow it at all.
And it looks like they're a little fuzzy.
The flowers are tiny bit fuzzy because they're an early spring bloomer right now, so they need kind of protection from the frosts because we're still getting a lot of frost even this late in the season.
Kind of like the prairie crocuses.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, we've got pussy toes growing right here. This is one of the plants in my presentation is this very low growing plant that just grows like that and stays that way.
It's interesting because I wouldn't have even noticed those.
That's as big as they get.
Really?
Yeah.
So really no mowing at all?
No, not at all. They stay flat, and then when they do flower, it looks like a Q-tip. Yeah, and this one, I've seen people in gardening groups ask, what is this in my lawn? Is it a weed? Should I get rid of it? Because it's spreading in their lawn. So it's definitely something that you can incorporate into your lawn if you want it there.
Now, on the flip side, if somebody has some plants overpowering others.
Yeah, there's definitely some plants that are more aggressive than others. And I make sure that I talk about that in my presentation so that you are picking the plant that's appropriate for your space. And you're not going to end up with this wickedly fast growing plant.
So what do we have here?
Yarrow, one of the really good plants that you can use in your lawn because it tends to stay pretty low growing. It's very mowable. It's quite soft and nice on the feet.
I can imagine walking on this. You'd think it would feel prickly, but it doesn't.
It doesn't at all. No, it's very soft. As long as you don't let it flower. If it does flower, it does come with kind of a hard stalk. But if you're mowing it frequently, it doesn't tend to form that. And you can also leave the stalk alone. It doesn't get that tall. So it's great for pollinators too.
These were grown from seeds.
Yes.
So if somebody wants to put native plants in their lawn, is it best to start from seed?
Seed can be challenging. It depends on the plant. Some of them have a dormancy technique in the seed that helps them survive our winters. So they need to go through a cold period to actually be able to germinate. So some people have a hard time with that. So sometimes it's better to go to our native plant suppliers here and just buy plugs that are pre-established so they can start with plant material that's already grown.
Are there some seeds that are really easy to grow?
A lot of our native grasses are pretty easy to grow, but they're not always ideal for lawns. Some are, some aren't, and I discuss the ones that are.
What are the benefits of having these native plants on your lawn?
Low maintenance. Once everything's established, since they grow here, as long as you've planted the plant in the place that it's appropriate for it, you've given it the right sun and water conditions that it wants, you don't really have to do anything. They just grow happily. A lot of these spread on their own, like a natural grass would. It turns into sort of a sod. Some of these plants can definitely be mowed. I'm trying to keep in mind for people who have kids and dogs that sometimes you kind of need a lawn space. You just need a space to be able to go out and run around on. Lots of these plants can actually be mowed and they still look really attractive, or some of them grow so low that you don't need to mow them at all.
This workshop coming up on May 8th, can you tell us a little bit about what people will learn?
So I'm going to kind of give people an overview of our soil here in Winnipeg because we're working on hard clay and people find that really challenging. So I talk about ways to work with that. I also talk about how to establish a native garden space. Although I don't go too much into detail, it's a long presentation as it is, but I give you some pointers and some tips and some resources at the end to be able to get started. And then I go through the 30 native species of plants that are great for these sorts of purposes. And I go through their sun exposure and their moisture levels, whether they can be mowed, their deer resistance. I have all the details, and then I have a handout at the end of the presentation that people can use to reference later on because it's a lot to take in.
There's a suggested donation. Can you tell us a little bit about what those funds are used for?
So the Friends of the Living Prairie Museum raise funds to help support the Living Prairie Museum here, which is a 32-acre prairie preserve that has never been tilled. It is pristine and untouched. And so we basically help support the staff, and we just make sure that we have volunteers who are able to help go out on the prairie and help do things like gather seed and transplant seed here in our greenhouse.
Why is it important for you to share this passion?
I think that we're all becoming more concerned now about our native pollinators and ecological restoration and making sure that we're using plants that are adapted to our space and that have grown here for many, many years. And so I want people who maybe aren't familiar with gardening with these plants or who think they're weedy or might be a little too aggressive to have an introduction to them and be able to envision a way that they can maybe stick a few of them in their lawn or just figure out some way that they can incorporate native plants into their space.
That was CBC Manitoba community reporter Shannalee Vidal speaking with Friends of the Living Prairie Museum President Ash Burkowski. For more information about their event, Native Plants for Native Lawns, you can go online to friendsofthelivingprairie.org.
There are many people who bring success, innovation, accomplishment, and charity to our community. We'd like you to help us meet some of the best. CBC Future 40 will honor 10 Manitobans under 40 making a difference. Help us discover the inspiring people in our province by nominating a shining star in your community today. For details, visit cbc.ca/future40mb.
It's 7:46, 14 degrees right now at the Forks in Winnipeg. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. East End Confessions is the name of the new album from Zaina. The Montreal artist blends the North African musical styles of her roots and the 2000s style of R&B that she grew up with. This is Zaina with Temporary.
I've been having conversations, hearing about my old thing. It was complicated, had to do my own thing, and I don't wanna go back to that. That ain't where my mental is at. So if you ever see me, I'll be on my own time. Act like you don't know me till I hit up your line. I always come through with that, but promise me you won't get attacked. I just wanna keep it friendly, cause I don't really have it in me. You know I'm ready for a good time, but you're not gonna stay on my mind. All these parties never empty, and all my girls, they coming with me. There's only danger in the city, and you know I'm not leaving lonely. And you should know, before this goes on, don't lose control. I don't say so. They say love comes with drama, so baby, keep it simple. Didn't save your number, getting caught up in my tempo. You know I like it on standby, so come and see me right before my flight. But I'ma keep it honest, cause I don't want you falling. Act like you've been through this, I hope you won't be calling your friends for some more advice, cause there ain't nothing in between these lines. I just wanna keep it friendly, cause I don't really have it in me. You know I'm ready for a good time, but you're not gonna stay on my mind. All these parties never empty, and all my girls, they coming with me. There's only danger in the city, and you know I'm not leaving lonely. All these parties never empty, and all my girls, they coming with me. So when you see me, you don't know me. I like it better when it's easy. And you should know, before this goes on, don't lose control. I don't say so.
From Montreal, that was Zaina with Temporary. Her new album, East End Confessions, is out now. Just about 10 minutes before 8 o'clock, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM and 990 AM in Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel and on the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass. A mix of sun and cloud today, becoming cloudy around noon with a few showers and pretty windy. Some gusts up to 60 kilometers an hour this morning with a high of 17. A few showers tonight, ending in the evening, then cloudy, still a bit breezy with a low of 11. For tomorrow, clearing in the morning, breezy with a high of 23. An encampment is being set up at the University of Manitoba's Fort Garry campus. It's organized by a group called Students for Justice in Palestine. They have several demands. One of them is for the university to, quote, divest from companies and institutions that are verifiably complicit in the oppression and discriminatory policies against Palestinians. As of March 31st, the University of Manitoba had $120 million invested in funds in Canada and abroad. So we wanted to know, does divesting really work? And is it even possible in a complex global financial market? We have Tyler Chamberlain joining us now. He's an associate professor at the University of Ottawa's Telfer School of Management. Good morning, Tyler.
Good morning.
So can you start just by explaining divesting and how it works?
So the way that divestment works is it's a decision to not only eliminate all the holdings that you have in particular types of stocks typically, but also to ensure that going forward, you don't invest in those types of firms ever again. That's typically how it works in the examples that we've seen historically.
And how likely do you think it is that U of M's endowment is invested in companies with ties to Israel?
Well, it depends on where you draw the boundaries. If you are looking at companies that are specifically developing military weapons or involved actively in Israel, they might have some holdings, but these are typically going to be very, very small. For investments in university investment funds, most are going to be held pretty close to home. There's going to be lots of investments into big Canadian companies. And then after that, there'll be American and some European. But for most investment funds, their exposure to Israel directly is going to be very limited. And this is why you've seen in some of the other campaigns for divestment that the boundaries getting set broader and broader and broader, and it's starting to catch companies like Google and other giant companies, global companies, American companies, to be included in that. Because if they don't include those, basically they're not going to be eliminating hardly anything from their investment funds.
So given that, far reach of the global market these days, how hard would it be for a university like U of M to meet this specific demand of the protesters to divest?
Well, it certainly can't happen all that quickly. It takes some time. You have to work with all of your asset managers because any large investor is going to have companies or investment funds that are managing their resources directly. There aren't people at the University of Manitoba that are sitting there, picking individual stocks. So you have to go through that process with those other companies to explain who it is you don't want to be investing in and to give some time for them to unwind or get out of some of those positions. They don't want to dump it very, very quickly because that could have a very negative cost on the fund. And of course, their primary goal is to try to make these a profitable investment for the holders. But it certainly can happen, and there will be costs involved. So going forward, the fees that are going to be charged to the pension fund for investing their funds are going to rise. So it's going to become harder for the fund to meet its obligations to existing pensioners and future pensioners.
Right. So if the university did choose to divest, what effect would that have on the portfolio and the people, who are also invested in it?
Well, I mean, first of all, to say it's unlikely to have a very substantial impact just because these holdings are very small in the first place. So it's not going to hurt them in terms of, if they can't hold these very specific stocks in Israeli military companies. But what it does by putting these filters on their investments is going to raise their overall costs for running the fund. So it is going to affect them. It will reduce their returns. So at that point, you have to decide whether it's worth it or not. And again, also, it's important to separate. I mean, the big funds are actually the pension funds. Those are the ones that have billions of dollars in them. The individual investments, while it can sound very large for individuals, $100 million, $200 million, at a global level, these are very small figures. And in fact, whereas in the U.S., big universities in the U.S. rely very heavily on very large, multi-billion dollar investment funds. In Canada, these are very small contributions. So at the University of Ottawa, the investment fund contributes 1%, maybe 2% of funds in any given year. It depends on how you look on it and depends on what you include. If you only include the investment fund of the university, very, very little. If you include the pension fund, it can be more significant.
Yeah, because, the pension fund, that might have an impact on the staff, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. And in those situations, this is where we've seen some of these protests go in different directions because, you should talk to the pensioners about what they want. It is their money. Half of the money in that fund is coming from their salaries. And so they should have some say in the investment decisions that are being made. And so that's where it gets even more complicated. So if you're asking for divestment, not only of the university's investment funds, but also the pension fund, there's going to have to be a dialogue process there with employees, with retirees, with all of those groups to make sure that they're all on board. And what do you do if they're not? And what threshold do you set for including that? And that's why all of these sort of desires for divestment can't happen very quickly. There's so many steps that have to be taken, and in places that have been at this now for a few months. I know that the University of Manitoba is a bit new to this, but places in the U.S. which have been going for weeks and months, that it's a long-term process that they ultimately commit to get there. And it's going to be interesting to see whether things have died down in Gaza by that time, whether these things are ever going to come to be.
So just in the last 30 seconds here before you go, Tyler, I mean, is the university kind of in this no-win situation? Some people are upset if they divest. Others are upset if they don't. Like, where does it leave them?
Yeah, it's difficult, and they're really being drawn into something where the impact is quite questionable. There could definitely be symbolic value to these divestment, but even if you look at what's been going on in the Russia-Ukraine war, there was global effort to sanction Russia and to stop trade going from or to Russia. The result was that oil from Russia ended up flowing to China and India almost uninterrupted. In fact, they're pumping even more than previously. And most of the trade in equipment that would actually go into parts that would end up going into military equipment stopped going directly to Russia, but they ended up going to Tajikistan and other places nearby where they were forwarded on. So universities are not only pulled into this situation and have that conflict between their different groups and their different stakeholders. Potentially, they're being drawn into it for something where the overall effectiveness of doing this is really quite limited. Again, beyond the symbolic.
Well, thanks so much for joining us and explaining this, Tyler.
My pleasure. Good luck.
Tyler Chamberlain is an associate professor at the University of Ottawa's Telfer School of Management. Time now for news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, a legal expert says Jeremy Skibicki's lawyers could face an uphill battle proving their client is not criminally responsible in the deaths of 4 women. Skibicki's lawyer now say he admits to killing all 4 women. We're going to hear from Brandon Trask from the University of Manitoba coming up. And we are learning more about the province's move to ensure Manitoba students will learn about the Holocaust. Yesterday on Holocaust Remembrance Day, the Education Minister announced learning about anti-Semitism, racism, and inequality will be in social studies classes. We'll hear more coming up at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather. That was CBC's Heather Wells. World Report is up next.
With Tom Power.
And you want to be my latex salesman.
Jerry Seinfeld just directed his first feature film. It's called Unfrosted, and it's about Pop-Tarts. Jerry will tell you how his obsession with Pop-Tarts inspired the film and why he's always made really silly, mundane things seem very serious. No soup for you! That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcast. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Hospitals are known for their bad food, so much so that, like airplane food, it's a cliche. But one Vancouver hospital is working with a chef to change that and give patients meals that are diverse, delicious, and actually healing. That's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Israeli tanks are now controlling the Palestinian side of the Rafah border crossing. The crossing between Egypt and southern Gaza is a critical lifeline for aid groups. It's the main entry point and the only way out for wounded Palestinians. Israel's military says its troops are scanning the area. The IDF launched a ground and air operation in Rafah overnight. The European Union's top diplomat, Josep Borrell, is condemning that move.
In spite of this warning and this request, the attack started yesterday night. I am afraid that this is going to cause again a lot of casualties, civilian casualties, whatever they say.
Qatar is sending a new team of negotiators to Cairo this morning. They are still trying to reach a ceasefire deal. 3 members of an alleged hit squad are due in a BC court today. They are accused of taking part in the murder of Sikh activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. All are Indian citizens. All face first-degree murder and conspiracy charges. The Prime Minister alleges this killing was orchestrated by the Indian government. Georgie Smythe has more.
One of the rare times I'm reading local criminal news for the first time on my New York Times app.
As Vancouver criminal lawyer Brock Martland knows, there's significant interest around the case of murdered Sikh separatist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. The temple leader was gunned down outside his Surrey Gurdwara in June last year. Police said they were working on a months-long investigation. Then on Friday, this.
We arrested and charged 3 individuals.
After being taken into custody in Edmonton, Kamalpreet Singh, Karanpreet Singh and Karan Brar were charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. They're facing a court via video link in Greater Vancouver today. But the cases are far more reaching than most criminal proceedings. Last year in the House of Commons, the Prime Minister shared what he called credible allegations of a potential link between the killing and the Indian government. Martland says with claims like that, the evidence that could be presented in court will be intriguing.
Is it purely a police investigation here in the Vancouver area that's built up a body of evidence? Is it informed by, or does it draw on evidence gathered by CSIS, the CIA, Five Eyes, other sources?
Police have emphasised their investigation is ongoing and there may be more arrests in the future. Georgie Smythe, CBC News, Vancouver.
A lawyer for Stormy Daniels tells the Associated Press that she is likely to take the stand today. Money paid to the adult film star is at the center of Donald Trump's ongoing criminal trial. It is in its 4th week. Aside from Daniels, Michael Cohen, Trump's former lawyer, is another witness many are waiting to hear from. Prosecutors say he paid Daniels to keep silent during the 2016 presidential campaign. Trump is also now facing the threat of jail time if he has any additional gag order violations. He was fined another $1,000 yesterday for violating the judge's gag order. Vladimir Putin is beginning his 5th term as Russian president today. An inauguration ceremony was held in Moscow. Putin took the majority of the vote in the March elections, and today's ceremony starts another 6 years of Putin's rule. Briar Stewart has more.
Vladimirovich Putin.
As President Vladimir Putin strode into an opulent golden hall at the Kremlin's Grand Palace, over 2,000 applauded the 71-year-old as he was sworn in for another 6 years as president. After taking the oath, Putin spoke briefly. I would like to bow to our heroes, he said, to everyone who's fighting for the fatherland. Thank you for your trust and support. Putin was officially re-elected in March with over 87% of the vote, but many Western officials saw the election as nothing more than a sham. Several Western countries didn't send representatives to the ceremony today, including Canada, the UK, and the US. However, officials did attend on behalf of France, Hungary, and Slovakia. Maria Semenova is a 26-year-old Russian whose boyfriend is fighting in Ukraine. She told CBC News from Moscow that if she could talk to Putin, she would call on him to make compromises. The only way to stop this bloodshed is for some movement from both sides, she says, so that people stop dying in such numbers every day and our husbands can go home. But there are no signs that any meaningful negotiations are close. It's expected that Russia will launch an offensive later this spring. In June, Switzerland is hosting a 2-day peace summit at the request of Ukraine. But so far, a delegation from Moscow hasn't been invited. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
Millions of voters across India are heading to the polls today. It is the 3rd of 7 phases in the country's national elections. Many are having to line up in a heat wave to cast their ballots across 93 constituencies. With another month to go until the 6 weeks of voting wraps, many officials are worried that the soaring temperatures are affecting voter turnout. Freelance journalist Pratibha Pasi has more from New Delhi.
India is experiencing one of its hottest summers on record, and the voter turnout in the first 2 phases of the election held last month was much lower compared to previous years, prompting Prime Minister Narendra Modi to make this appeal after casting his ballot on Tuesday.
I urge all countrymen to come out and vote as much as possible.
India's weather department has predicted longer and more intense heat waves this month, with temperatures in some areas hitting over 40 degrees Celsius. Today, in the northern state of Uttar Pradesh, queues outside polling booths were short, but those who did come out had this to say.
We have to vote
Whether it is hot or cold, only if we vote can there be change. Everyone should come out and vote.
The record heat was blamed for at least 9 deaths last month and has worried many experts. Rishabh Bhaumik, a Delhi-based doctor, says hospitals are already starting to see an increase in heat-related illnesses.
We are expecting to see a lot of patients ranging from something as simple as prickly heat all the way up to heat stroke.
Election authorities say they're taking steps to address extreme heat conditions by supplying drinking water at poll booths and extending voting timings. But by the time election wraps up in June, temperatures are likely to cross 45 degrees Celsius in many parts of the country. Priyata Brajbasi for CBC News, New Delhi.
Rescue efforts continued overnight in South Africa. Dozens of construction workers were trapped in a building that collapsed Monday afternoon. At least 5 workers are confirmed dead. 49 are still missing. It happened in the coastal city of George. That is about 400 kilometers east of Cape Town. Colin Dinner is the Western Cape Chief of Disaster Management. He says crews are focusing on the areas where they are still pulling people out alive.
It's going to get more and more difficult as the days go on because we're going to have to stop lifting the structures off. So that's when we'll start bringing in cranes. But at the moment, we've got areas we're focusing. There's quite a few more live people. It's the most I've ever seen in a structural collapse like this.
So far, 24 workers have been pulled to safety. Ottawa could soon have shelters in communities that have never seen one. The city is considering a change to zoning rules to make that happen. Right now, the system forces people to come downtown for a bed. Those who are experiencing homelessness end up in one neighborhood. Arthur White-Crummy reports.
Ottawa's 3 major homeless shelters are just blocks away from each other. Peter Tilley runs one, the Ottawa Mission. It's so full he's watched people spend the night in plastic chairs in its waiting room. Tilley dreams of a more decentralized system where mini shelters with 15 to 40 beds open up in low-rise suburban areas. He says it would be easier to house people if they don't have to come downtown for a bed.
How much easier to divert somebody who's come to a center that's within their community, the community they know, so they're not displaced.
But that isn't easy in a city where vast stretches aren't zoned for shelters. In low-density residential areas and on some busy commercial stretches, emergency shelters are not a permitted use. Some cities are loosening those rules, and Ottawa could soon join them, as city staff propose a new bylaw that allows shelters in every urban zone. Councillor Stephanie Plante represents the downtown ward with those 3 big shelters.
I find if this becomes everyone's problem, then everybody will be engaged with solutions.
Even some suburban councillors are getting on board, like Glenn Gower.
No one should be excluded from living in a neighborhood. I think from a moral or ethical perspective, that's the right thing to do.
He says those shelters wouldn't look like they do downtown. The proposed bylaw still has height and setback limits. It must now go through a 1.5 years of public consultation, redrafting, and council votes before it can take effect. Arthur White-Crummy, CBC News, Ottawa.
And Arthur White-Crummy has more on this story on our Ottawa page at cbcnews.ca. Click local. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM and 990 AM in Winnipeg, worldwide on the CBC Manitoba YouTube channel and the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. Here's what's still to come on the show. With street cleaning well underway in the city of Winnipeg, some people have been having issues finding places to park. We'll hear from a man from East Kildonan who says a misleading sign left him with a towed car and a hefty fine. We'll also have a chat with Janet Stewart, host of Radio Noon, on what's coming up on that show. All that and more still to come on Information Radio. 11 minutes after 8 o'clock, time for news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, the first day of an encampment at the University of Manitoba will begin in 1 hour. Students for Justice in Palestine will set up encampments at the U of M, pushing for demands like allowing students to support Palestinian causes without fear of academic consequences. Encampment organizers have said any anti-Semitism, racism, or violence will not be tolerated. Manitoba PCs accused the NDP government of briefly reneging on a promise to hire all graduating paramedics. PC health critic Kathleen Cook says some paramedicine graduates were told they had no jobs waiting for them. The government blames the timing of exams. We'll hear more coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba News Desk. And joining us now with a look at the very variable weather we're expected today is Abby Adiemi.
Good morning once again. Yeah, throughout the day, we can anticipate a blend of sunshine, some cloud. As you can see outside, the sun is trying to poke out there. And then some clouds again would come back, and it's going to get thick as we approach noon. And then some few showers would come. And as we get to the evening period, it's going to taper off. But don't forget, some winds will also come. So
Everything but snow, I guess.
Everything but snow. Yeah, that's for sure. But currently, we are at 14 degrees in the city. Now, as we move towards the evening period, the shower I talked about will definitely be tapering off, leaving us with cloudy conditions. And of course, the winds also coming from the east will be tapering off as well into the overnight period. So we can expect a low of 11 tonight. Across the province, we're going to be seeing sunnier skies in the north, okay, because the conditions for the southern part of the province is more like another story. It's going to be rain during the lunch period, and then we'll see that rain starting in the Winnipeg region into eastern Manitoba, and then that rain would push a little bit farther to the north as we get through the afternoon to areas such as Gimli, Lactabunny, Victoria Beach. They'll be getting rain through the mid parts of the afternoon. And if we look towards tomorrow now, Emily, there's some good news because the morning hours will actually see the clouds that we're going to get tonight disperse, and then it's going to make way for brighter skies. And the temperature for tomorrow, the high for tomorrow, I'm waiting for 23, so I'm good. But we're talking about the highs for today. Brandon will see a high of 14. Thompson will see a high of 15. Churchill will see a cloudy day, high of +2. Dublin, some showers late this afternoon, high of 17. Gimli, Steinbach, Morris, all going to be seeing 16. So it's like, mix of sun and cloud, as I said, some showers, some diminishing winds, and then we're going to have like cloudy nights.
Something for everyone.
Something for everyone.
Thank you, Abby.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Abby Adiemi. He's also our studio technician. And joining us now is our studio director and traffic reporter, Corey Funk, with a look at the roads out there.
Yes, got a call from Allison on the commuter line. Eastbound Ness and Whitewald. There's a collision there. Fire truck is blocking the curb lane. And to get around, you actually kind of have to skirt around the collision, so you kind of have to stay a little bit right and then go left to get around that fire truck blocking the curb lane. So do look out for that. That's once again eastbound Ness at Whitewald. As well, construction northbound Moray Bridge just before Portage in the curb lane is causing some backup, says Ellen. So keep left to get around that. If you see anything else going on, if you're walking, biking, driving, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. I'll let folks know what you're seeing. That number 204-788-3093.
Quarter after 8 now, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. Well, you probably noticed it's street cleaning season in Winnipeg. That means some residential streets have temporary parking bans, and the city says it puts up no parking signage at least 24 hours in advance. Any cars parked during the times posted on those signs will be ticketed and towed at the vehicle owner's expense. But some say the city signs are confusing and misleading. Les Robinson says his wife's car was towed last Thursday and they now have to pay a fine of nearly $300. He joins us now live in studio. Good morning, Les.
Good morning.
So walk us through what happened. Where was the car parked when it was towed?
It was car, the northern edge of Elmwood, I suppose you'd call it, on Neil, just off of Henderson Highway. It's a residential street. It's not a feeder street. There were signs up for almost a week. Originally, they said Friday. They were actually up a week before the first Friday that they were up. 7 days later, on a Thursday, my wife was parked there. The signs had been modified to Monday, however, not Thursday. And she came out of her workplace, and car was gone. There was no cars on the street at all.
Confusing signs then. Like what you called 311 and explained the situation. What happened then?
Yeah, so my wife walked around the neighborhood, assuming that they'd maybe shifted them like they sometimes do in the winter without taking them away to compound or whatever. She found no results there, so I was able to come and pick her up. We checked a few more streets, and we called 311. After the obligatory 10-minute wait, we spoke to a gentleman there, explained our process, our problem. I guess they have them on file, so he said it's at the compound on Higgins, and we'd have to make arrangements to pick it up ourselves. And I said, so we explained about the signage. He said, well, if there's a sign up, you can't park there, irregardless of what day of the week is indicated on the signage. You shouldn't park there. Of course, it's daytime hours, I believe. It's not 24. And then I said, well, this is in error, so I'm assuming there won't be any fees. And he said, oh, no, you have to pay the ticket, $150, and you'll have to pay the compound fees as well. So we made our way to the contractor, I guess, is Tartan on Higgins. And there was a lineup. The compound was packed with cars. We negotiated our release of our car. They even charge like a daily fee for storage, which of course is applied immediately. So that was $130 in total, I believe. And while we were waiting for our turn to get out of the compound, we checked a few other cars, and there was another one from Neil from that day, because they have the tickets are right there on the windscreen, and a few other same day towed vehicles from the neighborhood.
So what did the city officials say when you mentioned the signs having a specific day and time on them? How did they explain that?
Well, again, he simply said, well, the signs were up. You shouldn't have parked there. And he said, when we said that it was contradictory and that the whole neighborhood was blanketed with this similar signage, he said that wasn't something he could address. This is a 311. And that there wasn't a process if we wanted to claim the money back. Which of course is broken up into what the city has claimed and also what a private enterprise has claimed. So I don't know how the city reconciles that if you are successful.
Have you talked to anyone else at the city about this?
No, we sent out 2 emails, one to the mayor's office and one to our local councillor.
Jason Schreier.
Sorry?
Jason Schreier, I think is.
That's right, yes.
Yeah.
And that was, your nerves are a little raw. It was right then in the moment. But between 6 p.m. and very late at night, the website wasn't working. I couldn't finish the submission. It kept hanging up. I closed my browser. I cleared my cookies, thinking maybe I had gone down a wrong path on the website or something, and it hung up and stuff. So I tried a different method. I got through on it successfully later, and Jason Schreier's office responded asking me about the web experience, if you will, but nothing about the ticket whatsoever.
And, meanwhile, the city has said people should be using the city's Know Your Zone app. And you're saying, that the times listed on the sign, according to 311, don't really matter. I mean, what are your thoughts on both of those things? That the signs, have these times posted and that, they're saying, check out the app.
Yeah, so I have the Know Your Zone app for the snow. But I didn't have it on my phone at the time, so I checked on the web, and in fact, Neil at that time was indicating on, just on a desktop computer through a web browser that it had been rescheduled for cleaning, which basically was saying that it had yet to be cleaned as far as I could tell, and yet they did clean it when they towed away the car. So it seems broken. It seems the system is, I think it used to work well. Certainly, we've been happy with snow removal experiences. There's enough heads up. I spoke to a lovely elderly couple that were there at the compound as well, and they claimed that their signage went up at 8 a.m. After he'd gone to work, and then I guess he came home and brought his wife down so they could retrieve their car. So I told them that there is supposedly there's a mechanism. We'll see if we get our money back. And they were quite interested in it. But
so are you going to do that? You're going to go ahead and contest the ticket?
I've absolutely submitted the copies of the document from the towing company and made our claim on the ticket by number and photo of the signage that the car was directly parked by. I think people try and do their best, and this prompts conversation. So I discovered there are people that really want to follow the rules, and they would pay the ticket and feel like they'd done something in error, and be kind of humiliated or embarrassed by it, and say, "Don't make a fuss. I've done something wrong. I'm just going to pay the ticket, and I'm not going to make a fuss." And they didn't do anything wrong, so that's unfair.
Yeah.
We want the streets cleaned in our neighborhood. Previously they'd gone to once a year. I don't know if they're still doing that, but it gets pretty rough. So if we don't get a proper cleaning in the spring, you got to wait 12 months.
Yeah.
For anything else to get cleared up. It's
right.
So we support the initiative, but they can do better.
Okay. Well, we want to hear what happens after you contest that ticket. Thanks so much for joining us this morning, Les.
Thank you very much.
Les Robinson lives in Winnipeg's East Kildonan neighborhood. We asked the city for an interview, but our request was denied. In an emailed statement, a spokesperson said anyone who believes they were ticketed in error may challenge the fine according to the directions on the ticket.
Narrative, lyric, heroic, romantic, verse, or prose. The 2024 CBC Poetry Prize is on. Send in your best unpublished poem or poetry collection. Up for grabs, cash prizes from the Canada Council for the Arts, a 2-week writing residency at the Banff Centre for Arts and Creativity, and your work published on CBC Books. Contest closes June 1st. For rules and more, go to cbcbooks.ca.
24 minutes after 8 o'clock, you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. Imodu released an EP earlier this year called Music is a Weapon. Now, the St. John's artist is back already with a new collection of songs called Amani, the Swahili word for peace. Here's Imodu with one of those songs. It's called Everybody.
Everybody I meet for this life won't always agree with what I think. I see that some cases warranty, but then I feel that if I just listen and not speak, anybody would be talking stupid or my stupid on my dreams. Because change your doubts, understand my ways, oh God. I know like the way you talk that, back up all your things for back. This is how I feel for heart, spitting on my dreams, cause that I must to be free of that, living on my dreams. Enemy, 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 in my life, in my life, in my life, in my life. Different thing, different thing, different thing, different thing. If you win, if you win, if you win, if you win. Jejely, 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 jejely. I just see, I just see, I just see, I just all the things, all the things, all the things, all the things that they do, that they do. Everybody I meet for this life. see got some kisses warranty, but then I feel that thief. I just listen and not speak. Anybody would be talking stupid or not stupid on my dreams. Can you not believe? Why can you not see? Visions in my dreams. Everything will be alright. You go see. Why we not believe? Surely it will be closer than you think. Can you not believe? Why can you not see? Visions in my dreams. Everything will be alright. You go see. Why we not believe? Surely it will be closer than you think. I meet for this life won't always agree with what I think. I see got some kisses warranty, but then I feel that thief. I just listen and not speak. Anybody would be talking stupid or not stupid on my dreams.
From St. John's, Newfoundland, that was Imodu with Everybody. His new collection of songs is called Amani. That means peace in Swahili.
Something strange is happening in Canada. Kleenex is taking a powder. A certain peanut butter is skipping town. And why is the Colonel burying bland fries? Disappearing acts when popular brands are discontinued on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland and on the CBC Listen app.
28 minutes after 8 o'clock, you're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1 from Winnipeg. Coming up on local news time. But before we get into that, Janet Stewart's here, host of Radio Noon. What's coming up on the show today, Janet?
Hi, Emily. We've got lots of stuff to talk about. For one thing, this is Manitoba Housing Day.
Oh.
There's a conference happening in Winnipeg, but we've got mayors and reeves coming from around the province to come in and talk about the issues of housing with all the social groups and try to get on the same page. We're talking about that, and then at our 12:30 call-in, we're going to talk about food rescue and food waste. What do you do to try to prevent wasting food? How do you feel about places that actually throw out edible food? That's our question, and we'll be taking calls at 12:30 live. But if you'd like to weigh in now, if you've got a comment or a thought, call us at 204-788-3797.
I always try to use the leftovers from last week's groceries before I get into the new ones. Like, I got to finish up what I already have.
That's a real skill. Some people have talked about the recipes that our parents had and how there was always something that used those ends. But now cooking to some families is kind of a lost art. They don't have necessarily that skill. What do you do? How do you use up those leftovers? Maybe you've got a recipe or tips for us. We'd love to hear them. 204-788-3797.
Thanks so much, Janet.
Thank you, Emily.
That's CBC's Janet Stewart, host of Radio Noon, which, of course, comes up at noon. And also this morning on The Current, we'll hear from journalist Paul Wells, who's reflecting on Justin Trudeau's once sunny ways that have given way to darker and more challenging times for the Prime Minister. That's coming up on The Current after our show. And right now, the CBC Manitoba News is next with Heather Wells.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 8:30, still at 14 degrees and mostly cloudy in Winnipeg. We're not warming up a whole lot today, a high of 17. It's going to be windy again, becoming cloudy with showers expected later today. Well, the first day of an encampment at the University of Manitoba is about to begin. Students for Justice in Palestine are behind this encampment. CBC reporter Megan Ketchison is at the U of M campus right now. Megan?
Well, the protest is expected to begin at about 9 o'clock this morning and run today, tomorrow, and Thursday until 11 o'clock at night. Now, where I am now is at the quad in the university. That's the large lawn section in the center of the campus. And security is very heavy. It has barricades set up around the quad. You aren't allowed to move into this area with your vehicle to park, and students are being directed away from the area. Now, the protests are just this moving to Manitoba. What we've seen in other parts of Canada and the U.S. with students that are protesting against the war in Gaza. And this group is asking for the university to divest itself of any investments that it has involving Israeli companies. As well, it's asking for protection and safety for students that have been protesting the war in Gaza. They also say that with this protest, that there will be no anti-Semitism, racism, or homophobia at all allowed in these protests. We've seen tensions in other parts of the country on campuses, but so far it is quiet here at the U of M. Reporting live, Megan Ketchison, CBC.
Thanks so much, Megan. Well, we are learning more about the province's move to ensure Manitoba students learn about the Holocaust. On yesterday's Holocaust Remembrance Day, the Education Minister announced anti-Semitism, racism and inequality are being taught in social studies classes. It'll be introduced in the next school year for kindergarten to grade 11. Belle Jarneski is at the Jewish Heritage Center.
About the Holocaust, but the danger of hate speech, which we are seeing more and more of. And we are seeing more acts of anti-Semitism, really an explosive growth.
Students from high schools in Winnipeg will be going to the tour for Humanity Mobile Education Centre. It teaches people about the Holocaust, genocide, and Canada's human rights history through the years. A legal expert says Jeremy Skibicki's lawyers could face an uphill battle proving their client is not criminally responsible in the deaths of 4 women. Skibicki's lawyers say he admits to killing all 4, but they will argue he is not criminally responsible due to a mental disorder. Brandon Trask teaches law at the University of Manitoba, specializing in NCR cases. He says there will be a significant onus on the defense.
The defense is going to have to show, on a balance of probabilities, that Mr. Skibicki suffered from a disease of the mind at the time, and that by suffering from the disease of the mind at the time, he was either incapable of appreciating the nature and quality of the acts or of knowing that they were wrong, morally wrong. And again, they've got to show that times 4 in this case.
Trask adds NCR cases typically involve offenses done over a short period of time, but Winnipeg police have said they believe Skibicki killed the women over 2 months in 2022. The 4 victims are Rebecca Contois, Morgan Harris, Mercedes Myron, and an unidentified woman given the name Buffalo Woman. The trial of Jeremy Skibicki resumes tomorrow. As rural communities in Manitoba and across Canada are struggling to attract doctors, some physicians have some tips on bringing family doctors to small towns and keeping them. Dr. Sarah Giles is originally from Toronto, but a volunteer stint in the Northwest Territories got her hooked on rural medicine. She now lives and works in Kenora. Giles says there's a very small pool of recruitable rural doctors to begin with, so homegrown solutions are needed.
If your community needs doctors, look at your high school students. Who of them could potentially be that rural doctor? We need to encourage people who get into medical school to have rural placements, to have great experiences when they go on their rural placements.
Giles says communities should also make it easier for doctors to relocate, like helping them find housing and childcare and making sure they have support of other local health care providers. Manitoba's PCs accused the NDP government of briefly reneging on a promise to hire all graduating paramedics. PC health critic Kathleen Cook says some paramedicine graduates were told they had no jobs waiting for them. The problem was the result of the timing of exams. Manitoba's Shared Health confirms 14 graduates were affected. All have since been offered jobs. Health Minister Uzoma Asseguera says the timing of the exams and the hiring of paramedics will be coordinated in the future. You can find more news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Have a great day.
You too. Thanks.
That was Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba News Desk. And joining us for one last look at the weather is Abby Adiyemi.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, we just need to expect that mix of sun and cloud throughout the day. And for the northern part of the province, it's going to be sunnier, while the southern part should brace for some rain, which will be starting sometime around the noon periods. Brandon will definitely hit a high of, 10 degrees plus. And then it's going to be, I call it a mixed bag,
Yeah.
Highs of 17, clouds, showers, winds diminishing, and then a cloudy evening.
Be ready for everything, basically. Thank you, Abby. That's
you.
CBC's Abby Adeyemi. He's also our studio technician. And joining us now is our studio director and traffic reporter, Corey Funk. What's happening on the roads?
Yeah, keep an eye on eastbound Ness at Whitewald. There is a collision there earlier. I heard that a fire truck is blocking the curb lane, so keep left. You kind of do have to skirt around it a little bit, so do kind of an S-shaped thing. Heard from Allison, so look out for that.
Thank you so much, Corey.
Thank you.
That's CBC's Corey Funk. My name's Emily Brass. It's been a pleasure filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. Hope you have a fantastic day out there. Hope you don't get caught in the rain and that you're prepared for all that different weather coming up. And the current is on next, so stay tuned.